My ex wanted my son out of private school to please his new wife's kids, so I laughed in his face, and the truth that followed exposed their entire act. My ex Michael and his new wife Rachel want to take my son Tyler out of private school because they want him to be the same as her children. They got furious with me because I laughed in both their faces. I have a 10-year-old son named Tyler with my ex Michael. I have primary custody, and he stays with his dad on weekends. Until now we had been managing co-parenting well. I'm from Asia where private schools are practically the only decent education option. I decided I won't get married until my son enters university. I work as a banker and earn enough to support us. The pension I received from Michael goes directly into Tyler's savings account. I pay for the private school, which is expensive, yes, but I can afford it. Last year Michael married Rachel, who already had 2 children. One is 10 years old, in the same grade as Tyler. The other is 8. My son already feels like he lost quality time with his dad since Rachel's children arrived because now everything is in a group. And Michael barely pays attention to him alone. On top of that, the stepmother tries to boss him around, and Tyler can't stand her. The kids treat each other with respect but don't consider themselves siblings. This weekend, Michael and Rachel invited me to dinner. I went. After eating, they sent the kids to the room and wanted to talk to me. They told me they can't afford private school for the other 2 children and that for equality they would have to take Tyler out of his school. They said it would be beneficial for the 2 older boys to study together. Same class, same school. I was outraged and laughed in their faces. I told them their financial problems aren't my business, and that my son isn't changing schools. They insisted, but I stood firm and took Tyler with me. Since then, they've been blaming me for wanting their family to fail, and for Tyler not getting along well with the other kids. I told them that creating bonds between siblings is the father's responsibility, not mine. I never spoke badly about them or their children in front of Tyler, but I also don't think it's my obligation to force a bond that should come from the father's side. If the father starts prioritizing his new wife's children over his own son, it's obvious that Tyler will distance himself more and more. Now they're saying I'm insensitive. Rachel even had the nerve to tell me that because of Tyler, she won't deny a father to her children. I told her she's not very different from an evil stepmother in a fairy tale. Oh, and there's more. Tyler already has brand name things that their children don't have, and they complain about that too. My parents spoil him a lot. I'm an only child, and he's the only grandchild, so he receives many gifts and is very well treated by my family. You know what? I'm not going to deny good things to my son just because they can't give the same to theirs. I don't really know when everything changed, whether it was when Michael became someone I no longer recognized, or when Rachel entered his life and decided that Tyler was just another number in her new happy family. The truth is, that night in the restaurant, something in me broke. I felt humiliated, as if they were making me a business proposal, not talking about my son's future. The worst was how they said it with a polite smile, as if they were doing me a favor. For equality, Rachel said with that fake, sweet voice, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. Wouldn't it be nice for the 3 children to share the same school, the same friends? I interrupted her with a dry laugh. It came out on its own. I didn't plan it. It was a laugh that resonated like a slap on that perfectly decorated table with candles and small plates of octopus. Equality. Are you really talking about equality? I said, looking at both of them, alternating between their faces. Do you want Tyler to lose his place at one of the best schools in Valencia to fit into your happy family illusion? Michael tried to calm the waters. He put his hand over Rachel's, but his gesture seemed more like acting than real support. It's not that, Claudia, he began. Then what is it? Do you want to punish my son because you can't offer the same to yours? Is that it? Rachel said nothing more, but her expression changed. She no longer looked me in the eyes. She sat up straight as if I were a nuisance, an annoying ex who didn't understand the common good. I took Tyler from there without finishing dessert. Since that day, everything changed. Michael no longer responded to my messages as quickly. Passive-aggressive comments started coming through WhatsApp, that Tyler was distant, that he wasn't integrating, that I was filling his head with nonsense. I ignored it. For years, I kept quiet about things for Tyler's sake, so as not to break the relationship with his father. But this time was different. This time, they were touching the most sacred. Then the inevitable happened. One day, Tyler came back from the weekend with his father with a look that left me frozen. He said nothing during dinner, ate little, and when I went to put him to bed, he hugged me tightly. Everything okay, my love? I asked him, stroking his hair. Dad said that if I don't accept changing schools, I won't be able to go on weekends anymore, he whispered to me, almost voiceless. I felt my heart break into 1,000 pieces. I didn't cry in front of him. I hugged him tighter. I waited for him to fall asleep. That night, I opened an old folder where I kept documents. There were all the school payments, all the conversations I had had with Michael about custody. I called Sarah, my lifelong friend, who is now a family lawyer. I need you to help me, I told her with a trembling voice. Michael is crossing a dangerous line. That week, with Sarah's help, I began to record everything. Every message, every word from Tyler, every incident. But that wasn't all. A few days later, I decided to visit the public school where Rachel wanted to send Tyler. I pretended to be a mother interested in enrolling my son. I wanted to see for myself what they were trying to impose on him. Something happened that I didn't expect. One of the teachers, upon seeing me, froze. She recognized me by my last name. She called me aside and, in a very low voice, said, You have to be careful with that woman. Rachel isn't who she seems. She told me something that left me frozen. Years ago, Rachel had been fired from that same school for inappropriate conduct with children. The case had been silenced, but some still remembered what happened. They used a medical excuse to not ruin her record. I left that school trembling. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Rachel, what else was that woman hiding? Did Michael know? Was he aware of who he had let into Tyler's life? I had to protect my son. But what I didn't know is that that information was only the beginning. A week later, I received an anonymous message from a number without a name. It just said, if you knew what Rachel did before marrying Michael, you wouldn't let her within 10 meters of your son. I looked at that message for more than an hour without moving a finger. The phone screen remained, lit in the darkness of the living room, and I, completely paralyzed, felt my heart beat in my temples. If you knew what Rachel did before marrying Michael, the words bounced in my mind like hammers. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. But I couldn't even drink it. I left it on the counter and leaned against the wall. I sat down, breathing deeply. Who had sent that? Why now? What exactly did I need to know? I didn't respond. Not that night. I didn't want to seem desperate. I promised myself I wasn't going to lose control. The next day, I went to work as always. In the bank office on Main Street in the downtown area, everything was as usual. Impatient customers, cold coffees, and papers that never end. But I was no longer the same. I was alert. Something had changed in me since that dinner with Michael and Rachel. I felt like someone had woken me up from a long sleep. Sarah, my lawyer friend, called me mid-morning. I need to see you today, she said urgently. And Claudia, don't underestimate this woman. I've dealt with people like this before. If half of what you told me is true, we're dealing with someone dangerous. I spent the rest of the day restless. I kept rereading the anonymous message on my phone screen, as if it would change by itself, reveal more details. If you knew what Rachel did before marrying Michael, those words echoed like a bomb about to explode. That night, after Tyler slept, I contacted a journalist friend who worked in the area. I said I needed information about a woman named Rachel, who had worked in public schools and children's clinics in the region. I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can find, he replied. 2 days later, he sent me an enigmatic message. You need to talk to Matthew. I was confused. Who is he? Her ex-fiancé, and he wants to talk to you. At first I hesitated, but curiosity and fear were stronger. I arranged to meet him at a discreet cafe on the outskirts of town. I went alone. I took my voice recorder in my pocket and a water bottle, as if that would protect me from something I still couldn't define. When Matthew arrived, he looked exhausted, like someone who already carried many weights on his shoulders. He was a man in his 40s with sad eyes and arched shoulders. You're Claudia, right? I nodded. He took a deep breath. I thought I'd never hear about Rachel again. When the journalist told me she was near a child again, I knew I had to speak. I didn't believe it at first either. Rachel knows how to manipulate like no one else. We stayed there for almost an hour. He told me that Rachel played the victim, said that others persecuted her out of jealousy, used anxiety attacks to justify disappearances. And the worst, one day, when Matthew announced he wanted to break up, she said she had been abused by a cousin of his in childhood, and that he was an accomplice for not believing her. The family fell apart. His mother had a stroke after the scandal. Rachel disappeared. There was never a formal complaint, just disgrace. Later, we discovered it was all a lie. My cousin was in another country at the time she alleged the abuse. That's when I understood she didn't lie on impulse. It was method, control, fear. I lost my family because of her. He swallowed hard. If she's near your son, you need to get her out of his life now before she destroys his too. I returned home devastated. I felt dirty, as if something had entered my house without my permission, as if Rachel had already contaminated everything around. On the way back, I began to wonder, did Michael know this? Could it be that even after everything, he chose to pretend? I arrived home late. Tyler was already sleeping. I kissed his forehead, held his hand, and there, kneeling beside his bed, I made the most serious promise of my life. No one will touch you, manipulate you, or use you as a chess piece in an adult game. I will protect you, son, until the end. The next morning, I asked Sarah to come to my apartment. I told her everything. I showed her the audios, the screenshots, and everything Matthew had told me. She listened in silence. In the end, she just said, "We're going to do this the right way, legally, but first we need evidence." Sarah suggested a bold idea. She would help me formally register an incident diary with date, time, and description of everything, every reaction Tyler had after returning from his father's house, every strange phrase, every behavioral change. And there's more. She said, we can use a recorder, something Tyler carries without realizing, for his safety, just to protect ourselves. At first, I hesitated. It was a delicate line, but after everything I heard about Rachel, there was no more room for naivety. I put a small recorder in his backpack, camouflaged among the pockets, and I waited. What I heard afterward took away my sleep for nights. In the recording, Rachel spoke with Tyler while helping him put away his toys. Her voice was calm, too calm even, but the words were pure poison. You know, Tyler, your mother has been saying ugly things about us, and if she continues like this, maybe she'll get sick. So sick that she needs to go to a hospital, and nobody wants that, right? You're an intelligent boy. You know what you should tell the judge, right? That you want to change schools, that you like the new family, that you're happy. My skin went cold. I advanced the audio. More disguised threats, more distortions, soft words with sick intentions. The next morning, I called Carmen, a woman who had been Rachel's colleague at a children's school in the city. Sarah had gotten the contact. Rachel? She said as soon as I mentioned the name, I don't even want to hear about her. After hesitating a bit, she agreed to meet me. We talked in a park overlooking the sea. Carmen was direct, no beating around the bush. She handed me a folder with documents she had kept out of fear. According to her, internal files, reports about Rachel's behavior with students, emails exchanged between teachers about inappropriate conduct, always covered up by administration. I read everything in silence. Carmen looked at me with pity. When I closed the folder, I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you. You just gave me the tools to save my son. Don't thank me yet. Use all this before it's too late." I returned home with a knot in my stomach. I put all the documents in a folder labeled Justice. I printed transcriptions of the recording. I contacted Sarah, and so, between tears, anger, and determination, I made my decision. That same night, I would file for exclusive custody and a protective measure against Rachel. I wasn't going to wait for the next blow. War was declared, and I wasn't going to lose. That night, after putting Tyler to bed, I sat in the kitchen staring fixedly at the red folder labeled Justice. It seemed to contain more than just papers. It seemed to contain my last hope of protecting my son. I texted Sarah, and we arranged to meet early at her office the next day. I knew I couldn't waste time. I arrived there before the door even opened. Sarah received me with a tight hug. She had already heard a snippet of the recording I sent by email and had her eyes full of indignation. "This here isn't just a veiled threat, Claudia," she said, turning the laptop toward me. "It's emotional extortion against a child, and it's illegal. We can file for a protective measure, not just for you, but mainly for him." I took a deep breath. I didn't want Tyler to go through courts, psychologists, hearings, but I realized that if I didn't do this now, the consequences would be worse. Sarah guided me to continue recording, but more carefully. Tyler couldn't notice. His protection was the priority. She handed me a new recorder, smaller with better quality. I carefully sewed it into the lining of Tyler's backpack, and before leaving him at his father's house gate that Friday, I knelt in front of him. "Anything that bothers you, you tell me, okay, love? Even if it seems small, your voice is important." He nodded and hugged me tighter than usual, as if he also knew something was wrong, even without understanding everything. On Sunday night when he came back, the first thing I did after a long hug was take the recorder from the backpack. I waited for him to sleep and went straight to the computer. When I heard what Rachel said on that visit, I felt my stomach turn. "If your mother continues meddling with our life, she's going to pay. She's going to disappear. Tyler, do you want that?" The coldness in her voice gave me chills, and the worst was hearing my son responding with a timid no between muffled sobs. "Then behave. Say you like studying with your brothers. Say you want to change schools. Everything will be fine if you obey. You want your father to keep seeing you, don't you?" It was pure blackmail, and more than that, it was psychological abuse against a 10-year-old boy. I stayed awake all night. I couldn't turn off my mind. I repeated the phrases in my head as if they echoed inside me. I wanted to enter that house and take my son in my arms, screaming. But I knew that now it wasn't with the heart anymore. It was with strategy. Sarah received the new audios early Monday morning. She was as upset as I was. We agreed that, in addition to the exclusive custody request and the protective measure, we would file an emergency protocol with the public prosecutor's office. The evidence could no longer wait. That same week, another piece fell into place. Carmen, Rachel's former colleague, called me. She said she found more documents, internal notes from pedagogical meetings, copies of emails where teachers reported Rachel's inappropriate attitudes in the classroom. One of the documents directly cited an episode in which Rachel locked herself with a child in the library, without permission from coordination. There was no formal investigation because the child's parents withdrew the complaint in less than 48 hours. But Claudia, everyone knew she was unbalanced, Carmen said. "I took everything. I scanned it. I attached it to the case files." Sarah began to assemble a timeline with everything we had. It was like putting together a dark puzzle. Dates, statements, names, connections. Rachel wasn't just unbalanced. She was dangerous. And now justice needed to see this. At the end of that same week, a brown envelope arrived at my building's reception. No sender. Inside, there were copies of messages exchanged between Rachel and another woman. From what I understood, it was a friend she confided in. The messages were perverse. That spoiled brat needs a lesson. Who does this Claudia think she is? Just because she's a banker and walks in high heels, she thinks she rules the world. I want to see her freak out when Tyler begs to stay with me. I'm going to make him call me Mom, even if it's based on fear. I closed the envelope and cried alone on the balcony. It wasn't sadness, it was anger, a silent, concentrated anger that gave me strength. Rachel had crossed all possible limits, and now I was going to cross hers for justice. Sarah filed the urgent request in court. The judge received the case and scheduled the first hearing for 15 days later. It was little time to gather everything, but enough time to continue reinforcing our foundation. By this point, Michael was already beginning to show signs of discomfort. He sent me a message saying he thought we were exaggerating and that Rachel was just trying to be a good maternal figure. I responded with a single sentence. "Are you willing to lose your son because of a woman you barely know?" He didn't respond anymore that day, but something told me he was beginning to rethink his choices. What he still didn't know is that everything that was coming would be much bigger than he could imagine. I was no longer the same woman who had laughed at dinner. Now, I was ready for war. On the day the summons arrived at Michael's house, I knew it not because he responded to me or because he called me. It was because I received an automatic notification in the court app confirming that the defendant had been officially notified. I read that while preparing Tyler's breakfast and felt a strange relief, as if, for the first time in weeks, I was in control of the situation. Michael, of course, took less than half an hour to message me. "Is all this necessary, Claudia? We could solve this between adults." I read that, laughing with irony. He talked about solving between adults after allowing his wife to emotionally blackmail our son. After ignoring recordings, documents, histories, warnings. "No, Michael," I responded. "When you accepted Rachel talking to my son as if he were a pawn, you stopped having the right to sit with me as an adult." Silence for 3 days. Then came the surprise. I received through Sarah a notification that Rachel had filed a counterpetition in court. She requested to be legally recognized as an effective maternal figure in Tyler's life, and more than that, accused me of defamation and parental alienation. I felt such a deep chill that I had to sit down. It was as if she was turning the game around, positioning herself as the victim. Sarah, upon reading the petition, murmured, "It's the perfect move. If the judge believes this version, she gains space, gains voice, gains power, and you become the hysterical mother who won't accept the ex's new wife." I took a deep breath. I gathered every piece of strength I had left. I looked at Sarah and said, "Then we're going to show that I'm not hysterical. I'm a mother, and I fight with evidence." And that's what we did. We began to organize the dossier like a perfect puzzle. Chronological, clear, impersonal in tone, but devastating in content. Each audio with transcription, each message with dated screenshot, each report from the public school teacher, the ex-fiancé, the former colleague. Nothing was left out. Sarah also made an important request to the judge that Tyler be heard only in a protected environment by a qualified professional, so he wouldn't suffer even more from the case's exposure. The judge accepted, but then came the worst part: waiting. The days between notification and the hearing were long and oppressive. Tyler continued visiting his father under my constant surveillance, but now with a monitored phone, and with agreed messages for him to alert me of any strange behavior. Even so, the insecurity was constant. On one of those nights, around 11 p.m., the doorbell rang. My heart raced. I peeked through the window and saw Michael, alone, standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets. I went down. He was thinner, with sunken eyes, unshaven. He looked like a confused, broken man. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Only out here," I replied firmly. He looked at me with a tired expression. "She told me you were making everything up, that it was just jealousy, that you wanted to separate me from my son out of revenge, and I believed her." He looked away, silent. "Did you listen to the audios, Michael? See the documents? Or do you prefer to keep pretending this is a women's fight?" "I didn't know about her past, I swear. But now you know, and even so, you stayed quiet." He lowered his head. "I just didn't know how to get out of this. She threatened to make a scene, said she would disappear with the boys, that if I sided with you, she would ruin my reputation." I took a step back. "So you preferred to protect your image over your son?" He remained silent. Then he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I know I was wrong. Can I sleep on the couch tonight just to see Tyler tomorrow morning?" My instinct screamed to send him away, but there was something in his voice, fragility, real regret. I didn't trust him, but Tyler still loved him. At that moment, my priority was to keep my son emotionally stable. "One night, just one," I said. Michael slept on the couch. The next day, he prepared breakfast with Tyler. They both laughed, talked about soccer. For a brief moment, I saw there the father he used to be, but I didn't forget. 2 weeks later, the hearing day arrived. In the courthouse corridors, Rachel paraded with a light dress and a fake smile. She was accompanied by a slick lawyer and maintained the expression of a perfect wife. Michael was on the other side of the waiting room, sitting alone, fidgeting with his hands. Sarah squeezed my shoulder before we entered. "Everything is ready. Just breathe. Today the turnaround begins." And so, we entered the room. The judge was serious. Rachel had a theatrical gaze. Tyler was not present, thanks to the decision to be heard in a protected environment the following week. We started with presentations. Rachel made sure to speak first. She said she loved Tyler like a son, that she just wanted him to be happy, that the public school was more inclusive, and that I, Claudia, was controlling, aggressive, and incapable of accepting that the family had changed. Sarah stood up calmly. She handed the documents to the judge, asked to project the transcriptions, and, with a firm voice, began to read one by one the phrases said by Rachel to Tyler. "If your mother continues meddling, she's going to disappear. Tell the judge you want to live with us, or your mother will go to the hospital." The judge frowned. Rachel began to shake her leg. And then came the moment that changed everything. Sarah called one last name to testify, Michael. He hesitated. He got up slowly. The judge authorized him to speak, as long as it was brief. He cleared his throat. He looked at me, then at Rachel, who stared at him with contained anger. And then, with a low but clear voice, he said, "I was an accomplice. I stayed silent when I saw that Rachel was crossing the line. She manipulated Tyler, and she manipulated me, too. I didn't know how to protect my son, and I deeply regret that." Rachel jumped up, screaming, "Traitor! Liar! You promised me!" The judge banged the gavel, ordering silence and her removal from the room. Rachel was taken out, screaming that none of this was going to stay like this, while Michael lowered his head in silence. The judge looked at me, then at the papers. "Due to the seriousness of the evidence presented, I grant a precautionary measure in favor of the petitioner. From today, Claudia will have temporary exclusive custody, and Rachel is prohibited from any contact with Tyler until further notice." I felt my legs tremble. Sarah held me. "This is just the beginning, but we won the first battle." I left that courthouse with tears in my eyes. Not of sadness, but of relief. and of a new kind of strength that was being born inside me. They were the strangest days of my life. The feeling of having won a battle, even if provisional, gave me relief, but not peace. Rachel had been removed from the equation for now, but I knew that her silence was just the deep breath before the next attack. Tyler didn't know everything, of course. I only explained that the judge had decided he would stay for a while without seeing Rachel, and that his father would see him at organized times and by appointment. He looked at me for a while, thoughtful, and then said, "So, can I sleep without fear?" I swallowed hard and hugged him. "You always could, but now you don't have to prove it to anyone anymore." The following week, Sarah and I concentrated our energies on organizing the material for the next hearing, the one that would define definitive custody and the validity of all accusations. But something still bothered me. The brown envelope, the anonymous message, the warning that there was more about Rachel, and mainly, why that had reached me. It was in this whirlwind that another piece of the puzzle fell into my lap, a new envelope, this time not left at reception. It was slipped under my apartment door. No sender, no stamp. Inside, a single printed photograph on glossy paper. In it, Rachel was kissing another man. But what made me sit on the floor wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the place where it happened, the parking lot of the very building where she and Michael lived, in broad daylight, without hiding, as if there was nothing to fear. I put the photo on the table and stared at it for long minutes. Then I called Sarah. "Do you think this is relevant?" "It's more than that," she replied. "It's emotional ammunition." Rachel always used the role of the faithful wife who just wants to take care of her stepson. If this here is real, Michael needs to see, and it could be the push that's missing for him to take sides once and for all. I confess I hesitated. I didn't want more problems, but something in me said that was the time. I waited until the end of the afternoon and went to Michael's building. He answered with a dejected face. "Claudia, if you came to argue, please don't." "I didn't come to argue," I interrupted. "I came to show you something." I extended the photo. He took it, stopped, and his expression changed. It was as if someone had pulled the floor from under his feet. He sat on the lobby sofa, stayed for a few minutes in silence, and then spoke in a tone I had never heard coming from him. It was with him that she spoke secretly. I suspected, but I thought it was just jealousy on my part. "Now, do you understand who you put your son to live with?" He didn't respond. He kept looking at nothing for a few more minutes. "I let her do whatever she wanted," he murmured. "With me, with Tyler, with everything, because I felt guilty for having failed as a father in the beginning, for not having stayed with you, for not having acted. So I accepted what came after, thinking it was my penance." He looked at me finally, and in that look there was shame, fear, but also something new. "Now, I want to fix it." That same night, he sent me an audio without warning. He said he wanted to confess everything, that he recognized his omission, that he validated every step of my legal action, and that, if needed, he would be willing to testify again, including about things that weren't yet in the record. Sarah heard the audio and was surprised. "I believe we have more than we needed," she said. "But this is gold." In the following days, we received confirmation that the final hearing was scheduled for a week later. Sarah asked me to rest, stay calm, avoid interactions with anyone connected to Rachel, but of course, she didn't cooperate. 3 days before the hearing, I received an anonymous call. I no longer answered unknown numbers, but I was distracted. It was her. "You think you won, don't you?" she said with a voice full of venom. "But this is just the beginning. I'm going to show who you really are, Claudia. I have my own contacts. You want war? You'll have war. You already started the war, Rachel, and justice is responding. Get used to it." I hung up. On the morning of the hearing, I wore the blue blazer my mother gave me on my first day as a bank manager. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman who had gone through hell and was there, standing. Tyler hugged me before leaving for school with my sister-in-law. "Today is that judge day?" "Yes. You're going to win, Mom. I already won just for hearing that." At the courthouse, Rachel arrived in black, dramatic. She stared at everyone with the look of someone trying to intimidate, but she didn't intimidate anyone anymore. Not even Michael, who this time sat on my side. When the judge started the proceedings, Rachel asked for the floor. She talked about her emotional crisis, her love for Tyler, her role as a victim of a spiteful ex. She tried to cry, but there were no tears, just acting. It was then that the judge looked at me. "Mrs. Claudia, would you like to make a statement?" I nodded. I stood up, and I spoke. I said everything. "Your Honor, I am not here as an ex-wife nor as someone hurt. I am here as a mother. I presented evidence, recordings, documents, testimonies. Everything in this process shows that Miss Rachel used emotional manipulation, veiled threats, and lies to try to take my son from me. She didn't do this out of love. She did it for control. And it doesn't matter what she says here. The truth is in the audios, in the witnesses, and mainly in the words of the child's own father. Silence. A silence so heavy you could hear the clock hands. The judge thanked me, asked for Sarah's final word, who only reinforced the technical points, and then the verdict. The judge took a deep breath, leafed through the files, and declared, "Due to the gravity and consistency of the evidence presented, I grant total and definitive custody to Mrs. Claudia. The father, Michael, will maintain supervised visitation rights, which may be reviewed according to future psychological reports. Miss Rachel is formally prohibited from approaching Tyler or maintaining any direct or indirect contact with him under penalty of civil and criminal sanctions." Rachel screamed. She was restrained. She left shouting, saying she would still prove everything, but nobody was listening anymore. Michael squeezed my shoulders. He didn't say anything, but his eyes said everything. Tyler was safe, and so was I. Finally. The courthouse was colder than normal that morning. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the weight of what was about to happen. It was the second hearing, the decisive one. Even though the first had been a victory, this was the one that would define everything definitively and publicly. I knew that this time it wouldn't just be a matter of evidence, it would be a matter of history. My history. On the other side of the room, Rachel wasn't there. She alleged a last-minute emotional crisis. Her lawyer tried to postpone the hearing, but the judge, already with exhausted patience, denied it. Michael was present, thinner than before, paler, but there, silent. For some reason, his presence gave me a strange kind of courage, not because I forgave him, but because he had finally stopped being a silent accomplice. Sarah stood up first. Your Honor, the postponement request was correctly refused. We have all the elements gathered, and with your permission, my client would like to make a personal statement. The judge nodded. The room fell silent. I stood up. Each step to the front of the room seemed to weigh tons, but I went because I needed to. I took a deep breath, and I began. I never planned to be here. I never imagined I would have to sit before a judge to explain why my son deserves emotional security, stability, peace. But we are here, and since we are, I want it to be clear. I am not asking for favors. I am demanding rights, mine and my son's. I stopped for a second. I felt the lump in my throat, but I continued. Tyler is only 10 years old. He is a sweet, curious, gentle boy. In recent months, he began to sleep with fear. He began to feel guilty about things that were never his fault. He began to believe that if he didn't obey, something bad would happen to me, that I would disappear, that I would be hospitalized. These ideas don't arise by themselves. Someone planted this. I turned slightly, without directly facing the benches where Rachel would be sitting if she had had the courage to show up. This person presented herself as a loving stepmother, but what she really did was manipulate, threaten, distort. She didn't try to build a family, she tried to erase ours. I saw the judge observing me attentively, not with pity, but with respect. I continued. My son is not a trophy. He is not bargaining currency to please children who aren't his, nor a bridge to simulate a perfect life. He is a child, and as a mother, my function is to ensure he grows up away from those who use him as a game piece. I paused, and I closed with the truth that hurt the most. For a long time I swallowed my pride to keep the peace, so that Tyler would have a present father. But when I saw my son come home afraid of losing me, I knew it was no longer about pride. It was about survival, and I choose to fight for him always. When I returned to my seat, I felt Sarah's hand hold mine under the table. I was trembling, but at peace. For the first time, my voice had been heard not as a reaction, but as truth. The judge asked for a short recess. When we returned to the room, he already had a defined expression. He had the documents in hand and spoke directly, without flourishes. After evaluation of the message history, audio recordings, eyewitness testimonies, and the petitioner's absence at this second hearing, this court decides definitively total and permanent custody to Mrs. Claudia. The father, Michael, will maintain supervised visitation rights, which may be reviewed according to future psychological reports. Miss Rachel is formally prohibited from approaching Tyler or maintaining any direct or indirect contact with him under penalty of civil and criminal sanctions. I closed my eyes for a second. That was it. Official. Registered. Irrevocable. Beside me, Michael lowered his head. He looked like a man stripped of everything. At the end, the judge still made sure to add, "May this process serve as an example to remember that true affection never comes from imposition or manipulation. Children are not tools of vanity or revenge. They are beings in formation, and this court will always be on the side of childhood." Upon leaving, the sun seemed stronger than ever. It was as if the world had finally returned to spinning in the right direction. But I barely knew that, even though legally defeated, Rachel still hadn't given up. 2 days later came the first attempt at digital invasion, an attempt to access my bank account through the bank app. Fortunately, the system blocked it. Then, threatening messages by email and a false anonymous report to Child Protective Services, quickly filed for lack of evidence. Sarah asked me to file a police report. I did, and I began to shield my digital life, my access, my contacts. Even defeated, Rachel still wanted to prove she was capable of making noise. But now, I had evidence. I had court decisions, and I had people by my side. Tyler, on the other hand, began to change. He went back to sleeping better. He went back to laughing, watching cartoons. He went back to eating cereal, singing silly songs. One day, out of nowhere, he told me, "Mom, now I know you'll never leave me." I responded with the only thing I could, "And you'll never lose me, even if the whole world tries." The war seemed to be over. But deep down, I knew people like Rachel never retreat completely. I thought that after the hearing she would disappear, that the weight of the judicial decision and public humiliation would be enough to keep her away. But I underestimated the power of someone like Rachel's wounded ego. She didn't lose. She was exposed. And people like her can't stand being unmasked. The first sign was subtle, invasion attempts on my banking app. I received 2 alerts in less than a week. My password had been incorrectly changed 4 times. On the 4th, the system temporarily blocked my access for security. I called directly to the manager of the branch where I worked. "Claudia, the access attempts came from a domestic IP right here in the city. Do you want us to trace it?" "I do," I responded immediately. 2 days later, the report arrived. The IP was linked to Michael's old account, which Rachel still used. Coincidence? I no longer believed in coincidences. I sent everything to Sarah. She asked for an urgent meeting with me. "She's trying to get revenge in another way," said my lawyer with a serious face. "She's trying to destabilize you, make you seem paranoid. But we have evidence, and more than that, we have a history. This isn't an emotional relapse, it's deliberate persecution. I filed a police report at the cybercrime unit. I included the screenshots, the access attempt reports, and the threatening messages that began arriving by email, signed as anonymous, but with phrases so specific they could only come from someone who knew my life inside out. Tyler may no longer be under my responsibility, but I won't let him grow up thinking his mother is perfect. You're going to fall with degree or without degree. The messages didn't shake me, they alerted me, but Tyler didn't know this. For him, things were improving. He had returned to school with a shy smile, reconnecting with friends, reconnecting with himself. He didn't deserve to carry anything more. I would shield him from everything. But then came the lowest blow. The following week, I received a visit from 2 Child Protective Services employees. They appeared at my work with badges, serious faces, and a folder in their hands. They said they had received an anonymous report alleging emotional negligence and inappropriate exposure of the child to extreme legal conflicts. They said I would be using my son as an instrument of revenge. I swallowed the impulse to scream right there. Instead, I asked for permission and took them both to the meeting room. I handed over copies of all recent court decisions, the psychological report that attested to Tyler's well-being, and the documents that proved the defamation attempt. The women looked at each other. Mrs. Claudia, we apologize for this, but when it comes to reports involving children, we are obligated to investigate. I understand, I replied with a controlled voice, but I am also obligated to protect my son from dangerous people. This report is false, and you know it. They nodded discreetly. The next day, I received notification that the process had been filed for lack of evidence, but Rachel's message was clear. She didn't need to be physically present to try to destroy my stability. She could attack from all sides. Sarah requested the judge to expand the protective measure. In addition to the prohibition of contact with Tyler, which was already in effect, she also asked for a prohibition of contact with me by any means. It was approved the same day, but Rachel once again responded as she knows how, theatrically. The following week, her lawyer filed a petition requesting the reopening of the process, alleging that his client was under a strong emotional crisis in the previous period and could not defend herself correctly. He included a psychiatric report done by a suspicious professional, declaring that she suffered from a severe anxiety disorder and that her absence was a consequence of a nervous breakdown. The judge scheduled a hearing to evaluate the request, and for the first time, I myself asked to speak, not to defend myself, but to tell everything. I entered the room wearing the same blue blazer, not as a symbol of strength, but as a reminder of everything I faced wearing it. I stood up when authorized, and faced the judge with serenity. Your Honor, I don't come here to ask for pity nor punishment. I come to ask for protection. I am a mother, and as a mother, I fought to protect my son from manipulations, threats, psychological pressures. I fought with documents, with audios, with witnesses. I won with evidence. Now, this woman wants to reopen the case, alleging an emotional breakdown. But what about my son's breakdown, the crying before sleeping, the audios where she threatens that I'm going to disappear? Was that an outbreak, or was it premeditated? The judge maintained a serious but attentive look. Rachel is not sick. She is frustrated because she couldn't control a boy, because she lost the narrative, because it wasn't love, it was power. And now that she lost that power, she tries to manipulate the system. But my son is not a battlefield, and I am not her rival. I am his mother, and I want peace. I returned to my seat in silence. Sarah was visibly emotional. The judge requested a review of the psychiatric report by a team appointed by the court itself. The final decision would come soon. But for me, at that moment, I already felt I had won something even greater. It wasn't about Rachel, nor about Michael. It was about me. I was no longer the woman who doubted, who hesitated, who stayed silent. I was the woman who spoke, who exposed, who protected, and above all, who was no longer afraid. The judge's decision didn't take long to come out. In less than 2 weeks, Rachel's psychiatric report was disqualified by the court team. The specialist appointed was direct in the opinion. There are no signs of psychotic outbreak or mental incapacity in the mentioned period. The petitioner's behavior is compatible with deliberate emotional manipulation and conscious strategies of social victimization. The judge ended any attempt to reopen the process there. The protective measure was maintained and expanded. Rachel could no longer have contact with me or Tyler indefinitely. The process was officially closed. Leaving the courthouse, there were no screams, no scandal, no scene. Rachel didn't even show up. She received the notification at her new residence, where she allegedly was receiving treatment, and she disappeared. But it wasn't about her that I was thinking that day. It was about Tyler. He still didn't know everything. He knew he was protected, that he wouldn't see Rachel anymore, that everything had passed. But what he never knew was how much had to be faced behind the curtains so he could simply be a child. For that reason, that weekend, I prepared a simple dinner with his favorite lasagna and let him choose the movie. We laughed, ate, lay on the couch together. For the first time in a long time, there was silence. Not the tense silence of when we were waiting for the next blow, but the peaceful silence of those who know they are home. The next day, everything happened. I received a call from an elderly woman named Teresa. I was confused at first until she explained she was a cousin of Michael's mother. She had learned about everything from the local newspapers. The story had circulated after the judge's decision, especially for involving a complex custody dispute and the accusation of child manipulation. She asked to see me. She said she needed to give me something. We met at a discreet cafe in the city center. Teresa had an old envelope in her hands, yellowed by time, tied with a light blue ribbon. She placed it on the table and said, "This here was from Helen, Michael's mother. She wrote it shortly before passing away. It was for Tyler, but Michael never had the courage to deliver it. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, a letter written with firm and loving handwriting. I read it there in the middle of that cafe with teary eyes and a racing heart. Dear Tyler, I may no longer be here when you can read this letter, but I want you to know that from the first day I learned of your existence, you became the joy of my soul. Your father may have his flaws, as we all do, but you are pure. You are loved. You are strong. Never let them erase who you are to fit into families that don't respect you. Your mother is a woman of courage. Never doubt how much you are wanted. With eternal love, your grandmother, Helen. I closed my eyes tightly, feeling the tears flow. That letter was a gift, a reminder, a symbol. When I got home that night, Tyler was already sleeping. I entered his room slowly, knelt beside the bed, and put the letter inside a new envelope with his name on the front. I wrote by hand, to open when you're old enough to understand the world. With love, Mom. But deep down, I knew he already understood more than he should. That letter, kept in a box next to the process documents, would one day be the thread between chaos and love. He would understand, once and for all, that he was never just a piece among adults. He was always loved by me, and by someone who, even in silence, tried to protect him until the end. In the following days, Michael sent me a message. He didn't ask for anything. He just said, "Thank you for not destroying my image for Tyler. He still looks at me as a father. That's your doing, not mine." I thought about responding. I didn't respond. I preferred to let silence work in his favor. He began to change gradually. He went back to picking up Tyler from school once a week with supervision. As agreed, he took him for ice cream. They played ball in the park without Rachel's presence, without pressure, without little theaters. It was the first time in years that I saw Michael acting not as a father who needed to prove something, but as someone who just wanted to regain what he let slip away. Tyler went back to truly smiling. He went back to drawing. He went back to saying, "I love you," without fear. He went back to being what every child has the right to be, light, and I allowed myself to breathe, not to forget, but to begin. Because in the end, this victory was never just about custody, processes, or hearings. It was about giving back to myself the right to be firm, the right to not accept less, the right to say, "I fought, and I won." I thought the silence would be definitive. After the sentence, after the filing of the reopening attempt, after Rachel had disappeared from the city, I imagined, or wanted to believe, that she had finally given up. But that was underestimating the desperation of someone who loses control. 2 weeks after the final hearing, I received a letter. A thick envelope coming from another state, no visible sender, but with the seal of a psychiatric evaluation center. When I opened it, I was sure it was Rachel. The letter began with her round, almost childish handwriting. "Claudia, I know you think you won, but time puts everything in place. I'm being evaluated. Soon I'll have my report revised. You can't exclude me from Tyler's life forever. He's going to grow up and realize what you did. He'll understand that you manipulated everything to look like a heroine. I'm going to come back, and when I come back, I'll ensure the court reviews this entire process." I closed the letter without finishing. I didn't feel fear nor anger. I felt pity. Rachel still lived in a world where she was the protagonist, where she could distort reality in her favor. But outside her bubble, the facts were recorded. The evidence was filed, and my son was well. More than that, he was free. Even so, Sarah thought it prudent to file the letter. The judge who was following the case did too. The message was given. Rachel still represented a potential threat, even if inactive. Any attempt by her to approach would result in the immediate reopening of the protective measure with aggravation. But nothing happened. For the first time, the days returned to being normal. It was strange at first. Normality scares when you've lived so long on alert. I caught myself looking at phone notifications with fear, opening emails with an accelerated heart, until I realized there was nothing. The mornings returned to being silent, the breakfasts longer. I began to allow myself things I had forgotten, running in the park before work, painting my nails again, listening to music while cooking. Silly things, but they gave me back to myself. Tyler had his first math test with a perfect score since everything began. I had to hold myself back from crying when he handed me the report card with a shy smile and said, "See, now that nobody bothers me, I can even like studying." We laughed together. It was true. The boy who before lived apologizing for existing now explored his own interests. He wanted to take drum lessons, then changed his mind and said he preferred robotics. He began building a cardboard city in the living room. I let him. He needed that, to create, to imagine, to be the owner of his own story. Michael, in turn, began to fulfill the agreements. He arrived on time, respected the limits, kept distance from any subject that involved the past. We exchanged cordial messages, nothing intimate but civilized. On one of those visits, Tyler came home saying, "Mom, Dad said he's going to buy a new bike for me if I want, and do you want it?" "I do, but I said I only accept it if it comes with a helmet like you said." I smiled. Gradually, balance was being built, not the ideal but the possible. Then one night, after putting Tyler to bed, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and found myself crying for no apparent reason. They were silent tears, not of pain, but of accumulated exhaustion. There, at that moment, I realized the war was over, not because Rachel had disappeared, but because I no longer feared her. I no longer reacted. She no longer had a way to reach me. I had evidence, shields, lawyers' testimonies, but most importantly, I had consciousness. And she didn't. It was the end of a cycle. The following week, I reorganized the house. I donated toys Tyler no longer used. I opened space in the closet, and I took from the last drawer a sealed envelope, Grandmother Helen's letter. I kept it in a new memory box along with a photo of Tyler at 3 years old, our first movie ticket together, and a scribbled sheet where he had written, "I love you, Mom. You don't need to be afraid. I protect you." That night, for the first time in months, I slept without leaving the hallway light on, because now everything was in place. 2 years passed since the day the judge banged the gavel for the last time. 2 years without anonymous messages, without veiled threats, without envelopes slipped under the door. Rachel disappeared, literally. According to the last court record, she continued in another state under voluntary clinical monitoring. But nobody saw her anymore. No new approach attempts, no new process, no movement. Deep down, I knew she would never accept defeat. But I also knew that for someone like her, the absence of a stage was the worst punishment. Rachel didn't need to be imprisoned. It was enough not to be heard. Tyler flourished. At 12 years old, he seemed like another boy. He had his own opinion, sense of justice, and a lightness that I thought time had stolen. He joined the robotics club, won a school prize, and in one of the pedagogical meetings, the teacher told me, "Your son is brilliant and very sensitive. He always asks if classmates are okay. Sometimes he seems more adult than us." I smiled with full eyes. I didn't tell her what he had already seen, heard, and felt. I just thanked her. Tyler was building his own narrative now without the ties of the past. I, for my part, decided it was time to help other women. I started writing a small text in a single mother's forum. I told, in general lines, how I faced a painful process to protect my son. The text went viral. Messages came from women from various places. Some thanked, others asked for advice. In a short time, I created an online profile to share reflections, guidance, support. I didn't take long to realize that what I lived wasn't an exception. It was routine disguised as normality. I began attending meetings, lectures, courses about conscious parenting and emotional abuse. Then one day, I was invited to give a small talk at a local seminar. My first reaction was to say no. But Tyler, who overheard the conversation by chance, said, "Mom, remember when you told me that whoever has a voice has to use it?" I took a deep breath and I accepted. That night, before about 50 women, I told my story with an open heart. Not as a martyr, nor as a heroine, but as a woman who almost collapsed and survived. I spoke of sleepless nights, of silence, of anger, of guilt, of strength. When I finished, an elderly lady hugged me and said, "You said what I could never say. Thank you for lending me words." It was in this type of reunion with the world that I found myself again. I didn't start dating right away. My focus was still Tyler, work, projects. But on a random afternoon during an art exhibition about motherhood, a woman approached. Julia, wavy brown hair, lively eyes, camera hanging around her neck. "You're Claudia, right? From yesterday's talk, I was very moved. I'm a documentary photographer, and I work with real mothers' stories. Can I show you my work?" I accepted. We had coffee, then another. Then we exchanged numbers, and gradually, Julia became part of my routine without invading, without forcing, without filling a void. She didn't come to complete anything, just to add. Our relationship was built calmly, with respect for Tyler's time and mine too. She never tried to be anyone's substitute, just a safe, caring presence. Tyler, surprisingly, accepted her naturally. "You like her, don't you, Mom?" "I do. She makes you smile." "It's true." "Then it's good." And it was good indeed. It wasn't easy. It wasn't without doubts, but it was real. Today, at 38 years old, I look at myself in the mirror and see a woman who fell, who was afraid, who was judged, but who won. Not because of the court sentence, but because of everything she built after it. I have a stable career, an integral son, a support network that I helped form myself, and a life that, even with scars, pulses with truth. Grandmother Helen's letter remains stored. I still haven't given it to Tyler. I think he'll know when it's time. For now, it stays there at the bottom of the memory box as a symbol of everything that time tried to erase and couldn't. Sometimes I still receive messages from mothers on my online profile, some in despair, others beginning to strengthen. I always respond with affection, with firmness, and with a phrase I wrote once that now became almost a motto: "When you lose everything, only truth remains, and truth one day finds the right courage to be told." That's how I started over, without fear, without Rachel, without ghosts.